So with that, I am happy to take however many questions you guys have, and I might even do my best to answer them. In fact, I will. Have at it. And if there aren't any questions, we can all just start buying an enormous number of books, which I think is a good thing for everybody to do. Yes, sir.
Did this start out as a love for science fiction, trying to match that to something that you knew about, as in write what you know, or you're like, I'm going to make fun of copyright law. What can I wrap around this to tell the story?
So can everybody hear? Because I can repeat the question. The question was, did this start from a love of science fiction and kind of connected to things that I know, or did it start with a hatred of copyright law? And what can I connect it to? And the answer is primarily it started with the first one. So many years ago, I initially had the idea, wouldn't it be awesome if the aliens were into our music? And it was a little broader than that. I grew up reading a ton of science fiction and being very excited about anything in film or TV that was science fiction. And I over time, I kind of got tired of the fact that when the aliens were interested in us, and they always were, because otherwise it'd be a lousy movie, it was because something we happened to have. They wanted our phosphates or our beautiful planet, or they wanted to put our brains in jars to power their spaceships. They wanted something that we had stumbled into. Or in other situations, when we look at the aliens, we have our own relationship with them. They always had these, sublime moral standards, and they viewed us as being really barbaric and stupid. And by the way, that's a great way to get a plot going. I mean, and it's worked magnificently in many cases. And I always used to think, wouldn't it be awesome if there was a story in which the aliens are like, oh my God, humans are so cool. And it's probably been out there. I mean, Galaxy Quest is in some ways like that. And but nonetheless, that always was in the back of my mind. And I always figured if that were to happen, music would be the mechanism. And then, I did this whole Rhapsody thing. That was, I've been thinking that for years. And I got to know this whole preposterous side of our copyright law. And I was thinking, it's causing so many problems for us at Listen.com. Imagine how many problems it would cause on like Zorkon 7 or something like that. So then the two threads kind of came together like that. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Were you a Who fan?
Was I a Who fan? Oh yeah. Have you gotten up to the part where the Townsend line? Yeah. So there is fairly early in the book. It's stated that the world is defended by this very powerful force field, which was initially put up shortly after humanity's discovery by the aliens to keep the stampede of quintillions of Who fans out of the earth when they were, they were going to go on tour and you guys know the Who. I mean, there's like the 3rd annual farewell tour or something like, maybe they're really going to break up this time. And so there were just enough aliens were going to come that it possibly could have caused the Earth to implode into a black hole. And so they put up this big force field to protect us, and it's called the Townsend Line. So yes, I am a Who fan.
Did you choose the Who because of the stampede at a concert there some years ago?
Riverfront Stadium. No, that kind of, yeah. I mean, I think that was in the back of my mind a little bit because that actually occurred. She asked if I chose the Who because of the stampede at Riverfront Stadium in Cincinnati, which tragically killed a number of people. It was all in the same time frame. So it was like a late 70s thing. So I was more wanted to come up with a name that was of a touring musician that people would absolutely recognize. And the fact that in an earlier draft, I described it as the Who's first annual farewell tour. But it was confusing enough folks who didn't realize that was a joke. Wait, they did it every year. It's like, so it was really a vehicle for that first annual farewell short joke, which is still very funny. But one of the things that I did, as I mentioned with the copyright law, the book is absolutely suffused with musical references, but I did make a conscious effort not to make them so overwhelming that a non-music person would be in any way put off by them. So they're present, they're there, most of them are so subtle that they will pass on, you might not even notice them. There's dozens of places where a character will say something, and if you think, well, that sounds familiar, it's like, oh, right, that's from a Skynyrd song, So I try not to make the music side so much of an inside voice that it would be detracting of the book from other folks. Other questions? Yes.
This is softball. What's the inspiration for the love interest?
What's the inspiration for the love interest? Just love is so important.
You have to have a love interest. You have to have a romance.
Yeah.
There has to be sex.
You know, there's the love interest in the story is a woman named Amanda Shark, and you know she's inspired by some people or person that I know. Kevin.
Well, are there any of the characters, especially in the legal profession, that perhaps may be caricatures of people or compilations of people that you've met in your
Of actual people. They're actually, believe it or not, so the question was, there's a number of lawyers in the book, and there's one particularly really larger-than-life character who's one of my favorite characters in the book, named Judy Sherman, a distant descendant of William Tecumseh Sherman, who, you know, torched his way through the South. And she's inherited that gene. And so he asked, was there direct inspiration from actual legal folk? And the answer is actually no. The kind of the dynamics within the law firm that my low-ranking guy works in, I worked in consulting for a period of time, and although that's not the law, it was a partnership, and sort of like the pressures of being in a partnership in a white-collar pressure cooker, that kind of came very, very vaguely in a diffuse manner from my own experiences. But the only person who had a legal dimension, there's a senator in the book who is called Fido. And he is referred to as Fido because he is described as being the music industry's pet senator. And toward the end of the book, I come up with a name for him, and I call him Senator Orrin Hatch. And like all characters, he's strictly fictitious. Orrin is spelled with 2 R. Well, anyway, yeah. So there is a certain amount of, you know, art imitate life in that particular character, but otherwise, no. Other questions?
Except the name of the law firm.
Oh, yeah. Well, the name of the law firm, Carter, Geller, and Marks. Carter had to be in the name because Nick Carter is my character. And then Geller and Marks just happen to be the last names, and this is just a coincidence, of a couple major music industry related attorneys, which is kind of like more of a shout out than anything else. But the firm, Carter, Geller, and Marks, totally made up. Any other questions? Yes.
So, did you have Vogon poetry in mind as you were describing the aliens' music?
No, I actually didn't. So, a Hitchhiker's Guide related question. So, did I have Vogon poetry in mind when I described the aliens' music? Their music is really, really, really horrible. But that plays much, much less of a role in the plot than the sheer awesomeness of our music. That said, I think anybody who writes any work of playful science fiction today absolutely is in one way or another in the tradition of Douglas Adams. Just like anybody who puts out a brainy rock and roll album, one way or another is in the tradition probably of Sgt. Pepper. He's kind of like the fountainhead from which all modern playful science fiction springs. And whether it's direct and self-conscious or indirect because you've been influenced by all the things that have been influenced by that work, I think that the influence of Douglas Adams is all-pervasive within this sort of narrow genre of comedic science fiction, which is narrow but expanding. Other questions?
Have you been invited to do any readings in front of the RIAA or record labels like that?
No. Have I been invited to do any readings in front of the RIAA or record labels? No, but so the Recording Industry Association of America, there may be certain aspects of this book that they'll get grumpy about. But the truth is, I got a very positive tweet from none other than Hillary Rosen, who ran the RIAA back in our era. And I actually, the tone of the book, this is at least my intention, and it'll be interesting to see how people react to it, but generally, with the exception of a couple really long-winded footnotes, the tone of the book is really, I think, is very playful rather than angry. And I think that that can be a lot more effective. I did a 5-minute talk about back in February at a conference that once was posted online, went weirdly viral. And I was talking about copyright law, and I made ruthless fun of a lot of aspects of it. But I did it in a way that was really just silly and playful. And when I finished my talk, a very, very prominent music industry attorney who I happen to know, who was attending this conference, was the first person to come up to me, or the second person, I can't remember which. And he came up and he said, "That was awesome." And so I think if you're playful about this stuff and you're silly, and there's really only one music executive character who's in this book, and I'd love to fly like a 10-hour flight and sit next to this dude, because he's just entertaining and funny and a whole bunch of other things. I think by being playful, you can get your message across a lot more. Other questions? Yes, sir.
Tell us about your writing day and how you integrate being a science fiction writer as an entrepreneur. How many hours you need to get some work done, and when you think it's done?
So integration of being a science fiction author and an entrepreneur is easy. I never do the two at the same time. I've written 3 books. This is the first novel. Both of my other 2 books, well, one of them I was a student while I was writing it. So that was the one time that I multitasked. And that was tough, but I was like in my 20s and able to get by on 3 hours of sleep. And now I need 3.5. So I'm still in my 20s, by the way. Then this book and the one that preceded it, full-blown, all-out, full-time projects for me. Now, in terms of my own writing habit, I've got this, I love to edit. And not everybody does, but my father, when I was a kid, his main hobby was woodworking. And he really, and I'm inept with my hands. I could not possibly, if there was any proof that I was adopted, and I was, it was my incompetence with woodworking. You know, he loves me anyway. But so he really taught me that, you know, in his opinion, pieces went from good to great if you really focused on the sanding and the polishing and the finishing and all that stuff. And I kind of bring that to writing. And so I love to edit. I'd say every single chapter in this book, I printed up and went through with red pen and typed in and reprinted at a minimum 50 times. The prologue probably well over 100 times. So whenever I get to a point where it feels writer's blocky, I just pivot over to editing, and I can sit down because of that. I'm not really prone to writer's block in general, but because I can always pivot to that other thing, I can sit down and lose track of time and suddenly realize 15 hours have gone by. On this, it was a very full-time job. I probably averaged 50 or 60 hours a week over a period of about 18 months. And there were constant little rewrites and 4 really violent rewrites that were really tip to toe. The woman who was sitting almost next to you, famously in my narrow world, told me when I was about 6 months into it, "Rob, it's great, it's got a lot of potential, you might want to think about giving it a plot." And she was right. And so that was the first violent rewrite. You know, one last thing on this. When I was in college, I was, you know, pretty diligent and on top of my work, and I only pulled 1 all-nighter in my entire college career. Writing this, I pulled 5. Just completely losing track of time and saying, "Oh my God, it's light outside." So I sit down and just, I've never had to like say, "I'm going to write an hour every day." I get sucked into it.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
What's next?
What's next? I think after 18 months of writing this book and 12 months of waiting for it to come out, I deserve a drink.
I'll join you.
Anything else? Thank you all for coming out. Now they are selling this book here, and I think it is absolutely wonderful and in many ways imperative to those of us who love literature to support institutions like this. And so I hope everybody buys armloads of books. I don't care if it's mine. Oh, no, actually I do. Buy that too. But you know, walk out of here with wonderful books, and if you don't, just come back. And particularly come back at Christmas, because it sounds like it's quite a rush here. And they have an amazing set of events here. So for those of you who are here for the first time, get online, check out the Booksmith website, and make this part of your habit, because I think, you know, we as a society will be diminished if bookstores go the way of record stores. I don't think they're going to, because I think we have a much stronger allegiance to the form of the book. And what I've noticed in going around for the last few weeks, independent stores are really, really vibrant elements of their community and very, very integrated with it. And they're not charity cases, they are real businesses, and they are vibrant ones, but this is a wonderful one. So no rush. If you don't want to get my book, spend the next 20 minutes browsing this wonderful place and spend all of your money here. That's it. Thank you.